Hello, it's time again for another of my racist women-hating rants of oppression, and I hope you're all doing very well. This video is going to be about one of Sweden's most abused and overused words, namely racism. Racism, just like sexism, has in Swedish public discourse been so watered down that it's basically meaningless. Overusing words tend to have this effect. For instance, I remember clearly the first time my father said "fuck you" to someone.
Oh, fuck you! Fuck the lot of you! Fuck you all!
Since he's always super calm and collected and rarely swears at all, hearing him growl "fuck you" to a person made me flinch just like I heard a gunshot. Racism used to be such a word. It was a word you didn't just throw around at people since it meant something horrible, and you definitely needed to be able to back it up if you spat it at someone's face. But today in Sweden and the world as a whole, it's so impotent in its meaning that I don't even care if someone calls me a racist. It just means nothing. It's used by liberals as a way to just insult you for not agreeing with them, and not necessarily because you're actually a racist. And it's hard to argue against because the definition of racism is in Sweden so extremely broad that it's just idiotic. The discussion around what is and isn't racism is tightly bound in contempt for white people, and disgust against any form of protest for being called a natural oppressor just because you're white. You being insulted by people claiming that you, as a natural part of your race, want to keep other races down doesn't really matter, since racially insulting a white person isn't really a thing in Sweden. It's just this butthurt idea created by privileged white men. We just roll around on our mountains of money and drink from rivers of wine and invent these ideas of racism going both ways. We don't even have any hate crime legislation against racially harassing a white ethnic Swede. The argument behind this discriminating law is that ethnic Swedes are not a minority, not yet anyway, and that we therefore can't be racially harassed or insulted. I was not aware that the severity of a racist comment directly correlates with the amount of people within a specific demographic. So if a minority we have here in Sweden would pass ethnic Swedes in population, our ability to racially insult them would then just disappear? Of course not. I mean, that's complete bullshit, because it's systemic white guilt that is the problem. Because me, as an all-powerful privileged white male, could be prosecuted for making these videos. I could be punished just for making videos with me moaning about shit that annoys me that we can't talk about in public. Foreign cultures and tradition, for instance. Because in Sweden, faith, culture and race is mushed into a giant impenetrable fortress of potentially hurt feelings, and those inside this fortress are untouchable, no matter their cultural or religious views, and your freedom of speech is in practice fucked. And if you try to drive a point home in the political climate that we have in Sweden, you'll be dry-humping a wall of hive-minded protesters, shit-slingers and populist politicians, all soaking their collective panties over the thought of crushing you. You the racist, you the hate-monger, the bigot, and incidentally, you the realist. You are in Sweden unable to criticize certain ideas or traditions within a person's culture, because then you're also apparently hating that person's race. So critique against, for instance, female genital mutilation, which is a very common tradition in several countries, will in Sweden then also mean that you're a racist. And of course, if you defend their right to practice it, well then you're just a raging moron or a cultural relativist, which is pretty much the same shit. There's a bit more tolerance for cultural critique if you are yourself of foreign descent, but you're still gonna get called an Uncle Tom by the left if you think an independent thought and hold views critical to the ideas of mass immigration. It doesn't help either if you're any type of conservative. Look, I don't hate people of other races, frankly I don't care. But today, race gets dragged behind cultural critique like a rabid dog on a chain, ready to shred anyone trying to speak their mind. You've committed a hate crime by disrespecting a person's non-provable beliefs, and since faith is very often firmly woven into a lot of cultures, the line becomes hazy about where faith ends and tradition and culture begins. Swedish lawmakers seem to have also discovered this dilemma, but they've simply and rather crudely handled the problem by just encapsulating all of it, culture, race and faith, and then call any critique against these traditions or cultures for hate speech. People might now say that I'm over-exaggerating, but if you read the law to the letter, it's all there. Does this sound like Saudi Arabia to you? Instead of 100 lashes with a whip, you'll have to deal with Sweden's unclear hate crime legislations. Because if you criticize someone's religion and it gets labeled as being a hate crime, and the PC public then gets a whiff of it, well then all odds are off. Serious hate crime court cases in Sweden are infamous for being easily manipulated by public outcry, and since you have, at least in the district courts, a bunch of whores in the role of jurors who pander to the district councils who elected them, you can far from expect an impartial jury. You might also have the massively bad luck of getting jurymen from completely opposite political parties than to which you belong. And since if you say something considered racist in Sweden, which is a lot of different things, more or less all parties will hate your guts even if you're guilty or not. Because an ideological witch hunt is good for any Swedish politician's career. It shows that you care about other people and that you have principles. It makes you more votable at the cost of some poor bastard who had a blog where he ripped on Islam. And oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, these jurors with the power over your future, they know jack shit about law. But don't worry, these politically elected jurymen won't let their political views corrupt the fairness of your trial, since fairness is the main goal of the political parties that elected them. The idea of jurymen in Sweden is to offer the public a chance to take part in the administration of justice, and this idea is a complete pile of shit. I don't want my trial to be some social science experiment with a bunch of ignoramuses regarding law and the administration of justice being in charge of determining my future. I'd ask them all to fuck off and go back selling insurance or whatever the hell they were doing before. Knowledge and justice gets traded for idealism and unhurt feelings. It's kind of sickening, isn't it? There are people in our current government here in Sweden actively trying to legislate towards turning critique of Muhammad into a hate crime and an act of hate speech. And it's actually not much of a stretch due to the already ridiculous laws we have in place. Criticizing Islam has now in Sweden turned into also hating Arabs, which is bizarre since the majority of Muslims in the world are Indonesians. Also, the average social justice warrior doesn't have a damn clue what the difference is between a full-blown Salafist and a westernized moderate Muslim, meaning that they defend complete fascist garbage as well as valued citizens who just happen to be practicing Muslims. I would argue that there is a difference between the two, but liberals seem to disagree with me and just whip out their racist cards. Just listen, you can criticize followers of a set of ideas you disagree with without considering yourself racially superior to them. It's mind-blowing, I know, but it's the case. But people who know this in Sweden, they still get called racists for just stating the obvious. Social justice warriors can try to defend and bend this as much as they like, but think about this the next time some hippie rubs his nipples over how liberal and progressive we are here in Sweden. We are only one small push away from, in practice, having laws punishing people for blasphemy. In Sweden. In 2016. Because people in positions of power in Sweden repeat constantly that there can't be total and unregulated freedom of speech, which apparently then means that we need to let professional victims and protectors of radicals dictate the rules of free speech in Sweden. I don't defend race-hating, homophobia or sexism, because I don't care how you look, who you fuck with, or what's between your legs. But I will not remain silent about these restrictions, even from within a cultural or religious context. And in my opinion, neither should any Swede who values our free and open society. The new culturally relative norm we're told to accept without protest is outside what we would consider Western liberal values. This is a fact. And it would contain political ideas derived from cultures drenched in religion, which are all in direct contrast to our own secular system of thought. These are cultures where authoritarianism is respected, critical thinking is a threat, democracy is inconvenient, and freedom of speech is an insult. And we are today told in Sweden to not protest against it, because then we're going to be called racists. But I don't just want to sit here bitching about everything, so here comes the suggestion for a solution. Let's just keep hammering these idiots with facts, since they seem to struggle with facts, and let them call us racists, since it means nothing at this point. And in the end, we can see who wins, hurt feelings or empirical facts. Take care of yourself, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Now this brings us to the sorts of moves that people are apt to make in the moral sphere. Okay? Consider the great problem of women's bodies. What to do about them? Well, this is one thing you can do about them. You can cover them up. Now, it is the position, generally speaking, of our intellectual community that, while we might not like this, we might think of this as wrong in Boston or Palo Alto. Who are we to say that the proud denizens of an ancient culture are wrong to force their wives and daughters to live in cloth bags? I mean, who are we to say even that they're wrong to beat them with lengths of steel cable or throw battery acid in their faces if they decline the privilege of being smothered in this way? Okay, well, who are we not to say this? Who are we to pretend that we know so little about human well-being that we have to be non-judgmental about a practice like this?